Today is the 31st of May, Memorial Day. For most people who talk to me about Memorial Day, they say it's about remembering and celebrating the sacrifices of soldiers who have fought to uphold the freedoms of the United States. I think it's also important that you can acknowledge a sacrifice without forgetting that the people who engage in it are individual people, not a monolithic whole, as soldiers who tend to be seen. This means accepting that while some of those who fought and died were fighting for my rights and freedom, others were fighting to uphold an ideal that they held that then believe included people who looked differently than themselves. In World War II, Native American and black soldiers were ostracized and belittled by the same people that they were supposed to consider brothers in arms. And when returning to the country they'd fought and watched others like them die for, often didn't receive a hero's welcome, but more of the same kind of discrimination and hatred that they may have believed they were fighting to eliminate. You might think that I'm being unfairly hyperbolic, or that these are just things from a bygone era, but unfortunately, they're not. I live in the southern U.S., and I have to deal with the fact that there is a concerning number of people who view Confederate fallen soldiers with the same reverence that the majority of Americans use when looking at the military in general, sometimes even more so. We're having to deal with the fact that 100 years ago, during the Tulsa Massacre, the National Guard assisted and participated with police and white civilians in killing hundreds of innocent black civilians, burning and looting the homes of thousands with no repercussions. The black local World War I veterans weren't celebrated by the murderous mob or seen as compatriots by the National Guardsmen invading their homes. For soldiers that died in service, you have to ask which of those groups represented the type of country that they died for. Which of those soldiers would they consider to be brothers in arms? Now, I've made my opinion on celebratory days known in the past. While I understand the usefulness of them as a day set aside to be sure that people or events are remembered during our hectic daily lives, I can't feel the same reverence for them as the general public does. It's always made more sense to me that if something is important enough for you to set aside a day for, then it should be something important enough to act like it matters year-round instead of just once a year. Assist with aid to veterans and the families of fallen soldiers. Make sure that those you're electing are supporting laws that assist with the reintegration of those leaving service, that they provide easily accessible and proficient mental and general health care. It's well known that across the country, there's a disturbing percentage of those in the houseless population that are made up of veterans. Still, even with that in mind, most cities are more likely to install hostile architecture so that they don't have to see the houseless population than from adding additional shelters or counseling sites to help those in need. Thousands of soldiers who were drafted or joined the military because they were unable to pay for the increasingly expensive secondary education in America have died or been left with lifelong injuries and very little aid to help with them. So if you view Memorial Day as a day of remembrance for those who have given their lives for this country, then have the decency to do two things. First, acknowledge that these people were people, with all of the amazing and awful things that come with it. Viewing them in a near deific light denies them their humanity and creates a disturbing false view of American militarism. Second, care enough to push those in power to make useful changes that will help increase the standard of living for everyone living here. The greatest memorial that could be raised in their memory is a country that treats everyone living in it with care and compassion, and actually elects individuals who will enforce that, instead of another group that mouths old platitudes when prompted and continues the same practices that make me wonder if all the fighting and death is even worth it. The country that we have right now sure as hell isn't what some fought and died for. Now, in the case of Confederate soldiers, I say that's a good thing. For the people of color who fought and died in World War II, they might be disappointed that almost 100 years later, we've only made it this far in increasing equality in America. As always comes up, there are those who feel I don't have the right to speak about certain things. No one close to me has died in military service, and I didn't serve in the military, so they think I should just shut my mouth and be thankful. Keep in mind, my father and two of my brothers all served in the military. I didn't, not because I didn't want to, but because when I wanted to, I wasn't allowed. And if I haven't, one day I'll have to tell that story to make sure people get a few things about it straight. I will say that I say these things not to diminish the feelings of those that have lost loved ones in the military, but to help you understand that I'm not as distanced from it as you might think. So I say again, if you care enough to once a year memorialize those who have died for this country, do more than just mouth a few words during the rest of the year. Fight against the elements that are making this a country that continues a tradition of fear and subjugation. Act in a way that both helps those living in this country and makes this a country worth people dying for, in whatever way you're capable. Not that I really expect most of you to listen and act in a fashion that will help those who are different from you, but maybe a few might hear and start to think a little more fully on the realities of our country and act more compassionately. Whether you do or not is always up to you. At the end of the day, these are just a few thoughts from a very insane bookworm. Be safe and be good to each other.